Hey there fellow creators, Ben here from Cinder Studios. I'm back today with another product review. Today we're looking at Williamsburg oil colors. Stick around. Williamsburg oils are small batch handmade oil paints produced by a company we are more familiar with known as Golden Artist Colors for their acrylics. But these, they didn't originate strictly with Golden. They were started by an artist by the name of Karl Plansky. He made them in his own factory and company up until 2009 when he died, and then a year later, or maybe 6 months later, Golden picked up the brand and are now producing them today in a lot wider range of colors while still maintaining the quality that they had originally. Now, like any other high-quality artist/professional grade oil paint, you're going to be getting certain standards across the board. High pigment loads, great consistency and quality, pretty much guaranteed light fastness on most colors. But there is something about the Williamsburg stuff that is a little different than what you might find out of regular oil paints, so stick around for those. Okay, so what does make this paint so different? The biggest one, and one that I think you'll pretty much only find in the Williamsburg line, I'm not sure about that entirely though, is what they have come to call the grind. The grind specifically refers to how much they're milling the pigment. Now, most other oil paints will be all milled the same. All the colors go down to a fine, smooth, buttery consistency. The Williamsburg colors have a little more variation in that not every color is milled down to absolute smoothness. There are a handful of colors, depending on how coarse you want to go with the paints. They start sort of fine, smooth, and silky and glossy, from very fine to fine, and then from medium to coarse, and there's only 6 colors that are considered coarse in the entire line. But they tend to have a little more texture, a little more tooth, and will show a lot more brush strokes, excuse me, that will allow for actually more traditional impasto techniques. Now, these days, most oil painters aren't really painting with oils to use the impasto techniques, but again, we're looking at colors that are reminiscent and paints that are reminiscent of older style traditional techniques. The Williamsburg line has a lot of colors. I mean, a lot of the high quality brands have a lot of colors, but the Williamsburg themselves have boast 178 colors, possibly more actually now. I think they've added a few in recent years. But most of the things I looked into, like 178 colors. I'm like, okay, that's the baseline. That's a lot of colors to choose from. Most artists don't need 178 colors, but means that there's a lot of options out there for you. And the other thing that makes this paint remarkably different, I've noticed from other oil paints that I've tried, is that the paint itself is a lot thicker and denser than a lot of other colors, again, that I've tried. This stuff, I think I've described it in a previous video as being like clay coming out of the tube, at least in some of the coarser ground colors. It's really different. It's not something you're going to see in pretty much any off-the-shelf oil paint. Now, granted, I am mostly an acrylic painter, but I do want to talk about my sort of overall experience in using these colors. I've had a handful of them for the past couple of years. I bought a few more colors recently, specifically this little tiny milliliter, I don't know how much these, small these are. They're about the size of like a core watercolor tube. But little sample color set to try. It was pretty good. And I've been using those along with a handful of other colors for the past, I don't know, year or so. And this is some of the things I've noticed. So the first thing is I found a video just remarkable, maybe even superior to a lot of other oil paints, is the mixing experience is just really enjoyable. I mean, I know that seems kind of weird, like you have to mix your paint regardless, but I found in having the thicker viscosity, specifically with these paints, it feels just easier to mix up those batches of color without losing any kind of issues of viscosity in the process. You're able to keep that thickness and then thin with your desired mediums or gels. I'm thinking about acrylics, mediums or gels or spirits or whatever you happen to be thinning with. It really lends itself to a better mixing experience. Application is fairly standard. I mean, it's not crazy different than any other oil paint in terms of actually, brush to canvas work. I do find that because it is a thicker viscosity, you do have to tend to add a little bit more of your thinning agent to that to get it down to a more workable consistency. But that's really more of a personal preference thing. Again, different oil painters are going to work differently and use different mediums. But I do find that, generally speaking, whether you use a lot of medium or a little bit of medium, then it can handle both. And that's actually really something that's, I think, super valuable and really versatile for a variety of oil painters and a variety of techniques. Now, if I thought of doing this video 6 months ago, well, I did think of this video 6 months ago, so I didn't really think to talk about dry time a whole ton because, I mean, dry time with oils, it's going to vary a little bit between color and between brand, but mostly it depends a little bit on how much oil, linseed or alkyd or whatever oil you use mixed in your paint, as well as any kind of drying agents. I'm actually a lot of times using the Gamblin Galkyd Gel or the Galkyd Light, which is up on my shelf over there, to extend in the color but also speed up drying time because I tend to need to not let my paint sit in the corner for 2 weeks. This little demo that I did here for today, I did about a little over 12 hours ago on a piece of Arches oil paper. And while a lot of the stuff in the background is mostly dry to the touch, there's a little bit of moisture in there too because the paint still has to oxidize out. The thicker areas in the centers are still quite wet and quite tacky, and I don't expect them to dry anytime in the next couple of days. It's probably going to be a few weeks. But again, that's strictly a nature of oil paint. You'll want to see that for yourself if you're unfamiliar with general dry times, but I think it's fairly reasonable and fairly similar to other paints that I've tried, specifically oil paints. So we've talked about sort of my experience so far, but what are those like really true pros and cons? Well, before we get to those, let's think about what are the real similarities here. Well, they're similar to other oils. They're going to behave like oil paint. They're not going to be radically different one way or the other. There's also no really issue intermixing between other colors. I found that after I kind of laid down my base color for the demo piece, I was grabbing my other colors. I have some Utrecht, I have a Gamblin, as well as a couple of the Blue Ridge oil colors. All of those mix in beautifully. There's no issues with crossing brands or anything like that, as you would expect with any high quality product. So on the good side, you're looking at a very wide range of highly pigmented colors. Variation in grind level makes the paint great for impasto work, but some of the very fine colors as well make it excellent for glazes, as you would expect out of oil paint. One particular touch that I noticed that Williamsburg does, that a handful of other paint manufacturers do as well, is that they use painted labels rather than just like a little digital color swatch on the tube. This really, really helps, especially to get an understanding of mass tone versus glaze, to where you would be harder to understand that just with a little fake label or whatever on the tube. And as I mentioned before, the Williamsburg colors just have a great mixing experience. I've mixed other oil paints together, and it's fine, but there's something really uniquely different about the mixing experience with the Williamsburg colors, and it's something I definitely think people should give a try. Now on the downside, because this is high quality, small batch paint, specifically made by Golden, this stuff's pricey. It's definitely a few dollars more than you're going to be spending out of even some brands like Winsor & Newton or Gamblin. This stuff's a little bit more expensive. But you got to know that going in, because if you don't, it's one of the things where like, oh crap, this tube is way more. Now it's not Old Holland expensive, but it is up there, and it's definitely sort of I would call the low end of the high end price range. As I also mentioned in my experience side of this, I do find that you really have to work a little bit more medium into your paint before it's workable and ready to apply to the canvas. I don't find myself using straight out of the tube color or just mixed straight out of the tube color. I'm usually grabbing a linseed oil or the Galkyd stuff to really thin out the paint. And I do that with my other oil colors, but not as often as I do it with the Williamsburg ones. With any oil paints, and the Williamsburg is no exception, depends on color a little bit, but you're always going to get the oil leaking out of the tube. I've actually gotten into the habit of keeping my oil paints in a small box on the other side of my studio, because there was stuff leaking all over my table over the course of time. Like, I got to move all of this stuff away so it doesn't start making a mess of my work surface. Now, the only other sort of con I could find with these paints is that grind level from very fine to coarse is actually not labeled on the tube anywhere. It's something that I actually may end up contacting their customer service on. I'd just be like, hey, here's a thought. Maybe put that grind level somewhere on the back of the tube, because that's really a distinct factor for you guys. And I think having that readily available and something you can see in the store, rather than having to sit on your phone and reference it while you're trying to shop, I think is quite valuable. I actually have a little tiny map where they list all the colors and all the grind levels that came in my color set. I just hang up on the wall over there, and I'm constantly referencing back to it. I actually found in the course of making this video, I actually just put the little code on with Sharpie on the tube, just so I know. But I think that's something that could definitely be added to the tube, and it's something that I find myself being like, is this a medium grind color? Is this a fine color? I'm not sure, and I'm constantly going back and forth. Is not the most intuitive thing, especially when you're painting, and especially even more so when you're shopping. So where does this leave us? Do I really recommend you go out and get some Williamsburg oils for yourself? Well, I mean, you're looking at a little pricey, sure, but really high quality paint that's really enjoyable to work with. The extra thick viscosity of this stuff is not going to be for everyone, and if you're new to oils or just sort of starting out painting, I don't recommend you getting them as your starting brand. They're definitely something that I think if you have a little more experience, you're going to enjoy, but straight out of the gate, they're probably not going to be a good starter. With the variation in grind level, I think these are a great sort of supplement to a set or expansion to what you already have if you're an experienced oil painter. Or even if you've just done a few paintings and want to expand into a different brand or a different quality of paint than what you're used to. So yes, they do get my seal of approval and a recommendation with an asterisk. Know what you're getting into, know what you're buying. Know that, again, depending on which colors you're getting, it might be a coarser, less glossy color, or it might be a smoother, very fine color, which the very fine, smooth colors, there are more of those than anything else. But it is something to know and research before you buy this stuff. And I think those little color sets are actually really quite valuable for testing out some of this color before you are ready to buy the bigger tubes. I mean, as is the case with most paint. But what about you guys? Have you used this stuff before, and what are your thoughts on it? Or has anything I said in this video opened your eyes and made you think, wow, I'm going to try some of this, or okay, this might not be for me? Let me know your thoughts and comments below. Like if you enjoyed or learned anything. Get subscribed if you're not already. Check me out in social links in the description box below. Also, before I officially sign off, my Kingdom of the Wind art books are for sale at redfishbowl.com. Go get one. Thanks guys for watching, keep on creating, and I will see you guys next time. Hey, real quick before I forget, this little demo that I did for this video in particular, I'm going to let it dry, clean some lines up, get some details in there with acrylics, and then give it away exclusively on my Instagram account. So if you want to get a hold of this thing, piece of free art from me, go to my Instagram, follow me there, and look forward to that showing up sometime in the near future.